Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. I'm Ben Eubanks, your host. Glad you're here with me, and I'm so excited to have my good friend Terhark from NXTThing RPO back with us today. Terry is going to get into some of the insights around what's changing in hiring, what's happening today, and what you need to know. See, Terry will tell you, and it comes out in the conversation, that he's been in this industry for literal decades, and yet he is someone who's always at the forefront of what's next, what's coming. He has his ear to the ground. He has so many insights, and I always learn something listening to him. I know you'll enjoy the conversation as well. So let's jump into it with Terry and hear what's coming around the line.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. So you've been on the podcast before with me. You know it's conversational. Let's have some fun, and
Absolutely.
I'm ready to jump into it. So
happy to be here.
All right. I'm glad that you're here. Glad. So, hey, everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. So glad that you're here with us and looking forward to a fun conversation. I am so excited to be joined by a friend that I've had for years now. Goodness, Terry, I don't know how many years now, but so glad that you're here with us. Terhark, he is leader over at NXTThing RPO. I've known Terry through a couple of different roles he's had over time, and every single time I talk to him, I learn something new. I walk away thinking bigger. So I'm glad you're here with us, my friend. Welcome.
Yeah, really excited, Ben, to have another conversation with you, and feelings mutual. Our friendship has, survived the test of time. And again, always learn something from you in terms of your reports and the emphasis you've had on the RPO space. It's been incredibly valuable for us. So excited to be here.
Excellent. So before we get into some of the good stuff the audience is going to hear about, we're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about changes in talent acquisition. We're going to talk about what's really driving impact right now. I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about who you are and what you do so we can refresh the audience on that.
Very good. So I've been in recruiting for far too many years to quote anymore. But I'm a veteran. Some may call me a dinosaur. But I've spent my career in RPO. I've been fortunate to be able to build a couple of enterprise recruitment outsourcing firms. ReshapingThing, which we sold to ADP, became a corporate officer of ADP. Really enjoyed that journey and was able to grow the business considerably. We launched NXTThing in 2019, so we're about 6 years old, and I just had a blast building this. I just want to add a comment. I was David Duffield, who's well known, for starting PeopleSoft and Workday. He started 6 companies, and one of the best lessons I learned from him and kind of reading more about him was that he said he got it wrong in the first 3 companies, and he's gotten it right in the last 3. And the single most important thing was culture. I mention that because I'm so incredibly proud of what we've built at NXTThing, culture that we have as an organization, and how it really does come down to the individuals that you bring into your organization. So anyway, that was a really long answer to a short question. So
hey, I think that's what people are here for. They're here for that bit, and they're not paying for the airtime. So we're all good. It's all going to work out.
Very good.
So before I get into some of the new questions, I want to go back to a question or a comment that you made. So when you came on the podcast before, one of the things that I quoted you as saying, I'm going to read this off because I want you to comment on if you think this is still true. So I said, you had said at that time, what you're seeing is that companies are craving the information to understand, are we competitive? They're making a lot of moves. They're changing their pay, their benefits. They're trying to make all these adjustments. And really, they just want to know how they stack up compared to the competition. Do you think that that's still the case today? Has it changed, or is it still absolutely true right now?
So the craving of information is still absolutely there. I will say that the market has settled considerably. So the level of urgency around competitiveness, how do we stack up? Are benefits good? Is our comp good? Retention rates have improved over the last couple of years, and it's given companies an opportunity to kind of pause the level of urgency around that. Having said that, I do think that most organizations have invested in tools and technologies that are giving them access to this information. And, quite frankly, some of the tools that are available today around labor market demographics, competitiveness, et cetera, they've become really, really good. So I think most companies have assessed where they're at, understand what's needed, and they're not seeing the constant change that we saw a couple of years ago around pressures on compensation, retention rates that were going, attrition rates going through the roof, et cetera. So it stabilized quite a bit.
That part stabilized, but you started off with they still want to know. They still want information when and where they can get it. I think that's part of the thing that I hear all the time is when I have a conversation with the leader, they almost always ask me, do you know someone else that's done this? Or there's someone else that's like us? Has someone been down this path already and they know where to, what steps to avoid or what steps to take in order to be successful? So people are always curious with those things. That's why I love, as part of the podcast, bringing those stories to life, hearing from leaders like you who are interacting with a range of companies, because you can always say, listen, this is what I've seen be very successful. Maybe not try that one over there. That didn't work out so well for them. So let's avoid that. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is I had the chance this year to actually see, as part of our awards program, some of the things that NXTThing's doing around enabling high volume hiring. Some of the conversations I've had with you and Jamie and the team there have been mind-boggling, I'll say, just to see some of the stats and the evidence around that. Talk about some of those things here, if you don't mind, some of the details, some of the results, some of the value, because I think it's just too great not to share.
Yeah, a great question, Ben. And first and foremost, a little bit of context. I think there's a bit of a dichotomy in talent acquisition today from a labor market perspective. Yes. I think that most companies continue to be relatively cautious or conservative around hiring professionals or exempt-level roles. And we've seen that for 18 months now, or perhaps even longer. However, there is still tremendous pressure on frontline hiring. And, certainly, frontline is manufacturing, it's distribution centers, it's call center. There's a whole number of areas that kind of fall into that. And we are seeing many technologies that are coming to market to be able to serve that. And, companies have to hire their frontline workers. It's not an area where they can cut back, if you're a server or if you're working in a manufacturing facility, there is still tremendous pressure there. And I think if we were to look at the unemployment levels, they are definitely much lower for frontline workers. Anyway, so we set out on a journey several years ago to really try to understand what is important to a recruiting organization. And so we've built this technology with our recruiters in mind around what's important to them to be able to handle elements of the process for high volume hiring. It is about optionality. Candidates don't want to be put into one box. This is how you apply. Candidates, want to be able to do it on their time. They want to be able to do it on their phone. They want to be able to do it, in the society that we live in where they scroll through and can quickly get something done. So, we've put a platform out there where individuals can, from the minute they get on, 60 seconds, they can have, they've begun the process and they're in the process. And whether it's automated scheduling or whether it's an AI chatbot or, whether it's other elements of the technology, it's about building this technology for the candidate, but ultimately allowing the configurability for our recruiter and for our clients. So does that make sense?
It does. Yes. And again, one of the things that struck me is when I look at our data, we did a big study this year on frontline workers and retail, hospitality, manufacturing, the spaces you mentioned, and asked them about the problems they have when it comes to applying for jobs. What frustrates the heck out of you? I'm paraphrasing the question, but basically that was the question. And the number one thing was the long drawn out process. It just takes forever to get answers back. People are slow to respond. And as you said a minute ago, the expectation is different. If I'm applying for a job as a server or as someone who is going to be stacking boxes in a warehouse, this is not a 6-week process where I'm applying for this. Usually it's someone grabs someone within a couple of days and they're off the market again. It's different if you're doing this for an engineer or an accountant, or like they expect to come in for an interview. They expect it to take a week or two to get a response back. That's a normal sort of process. But for these high volume roles, that drawn out process is the number one thing they say drives them wild. And the second one is not getting updates, just not hearing back, feeling like they're left out in the cold when it comes to communication. And that's been part of what I've seen with the work that y'all have done. It's quick, very, very quick. It's immediate connection. It's immediate communication. You're up to date on what's going on. It doesn't leave you wondering, guessing, hoping, but you know immediately what's happening. And the real truth of it's right there in your hands.
Yeah, the patience level of candidates today is kind of through the roof on the negative side, meaning if they go into a process and they very quickly, this is going to take too long, they will move on to the next. And they have those options. So again, being able to build technology that is centered around the candidate to make that an elegant experience for them is really what it's all about.
I have teenagers, as you may remember. And I often say they have the attention span of, hey, look at that. Like that, It's already gone. They don't have the attention span to listen to that whole sentence. It's already gone already. So we got to get them through that. So I want to ask you this question that's been top of mind for me as I was thinking thinking about our interview coming up, one of the things that you know that I do, and I know you see these as well in the work you do, is there's all these different tools and technologies across the industry inside the RPO world, and then sort of tangential to that around hiring. And I'd love to hear from you in a world where AI and some of these other sort of automation tools can do things that in the past we needed a human to do, we needed a recruiter to do. It can feel like in some cases that like, do we really need an RPO in that kind of world where I can have an AI just handle those things for me? And I have some ideas around unique things that RPOs can do that an AI tool could not. I'd love to hear your take on that as someone who's seen this evolution over time. Again, you started out with the right thing all those years ago, and it was just probably, if I had to guess, pick up the phone and call and do it again and again until we fill a role. And you've come so far with the technology to see that evolution. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question, Ben. I could talk on this for days, quite frankly, and I've done a tremendous amount of research around the tools that are out there for talent acquisition with for our clients, but also for us as well. Let me start with saying that I have a fundamental kind of philosophical position that the role of the recruiter will never be replaced. I strongly feel that the influence and the intuition that a recruiter brings to a company, and whether that's knowing what the hiring manager wants or having listened to the candidate to understand the things they want and don't want, the ability to influence both sides of that equation, like those will be incredibly difficult for a technology to replace. Now, you talked about some of the days at Right Thing and now at NXTThing, very different. We had a call center at Right Thing. We do not have a call center today because we can handle that with technology. I mean, we had, many, many people answering the phones and smiling and dialing, as they used to say. It just does not happen anymore. We can schedule, we can answer questions. There are self-service tools, and we live in a self-service economy. There are so many tools coming on the market in talent acquisition. I think they're absolutely kind of increasing their capability. I did some research recently on AI recruiters, and where you're actually having an interview, with a virtual recruiter. And while some of it was a little creepy, just in terms of the interface,
yes,
depth at which they could dig into a candidate. I listened to one, it was an oncology nurse. And of course, the interview was structured. The AI recruiter had a list of questions they wanted to ask. The oncology nurse was answering the question, and in real time, the AI recruiter was digging into her answer. And those were non-structured questions. So it was listening to what the candidate said, and then it was digging into the answers. It wanted more clarification. So I was super impressed, like how fast these things are growing and evolving. And, if I were to say, what is the one thing that I hear consistently from TA leaders in my conversations across a lot of different industries, is what should we be doing with AI in talent acquisition? You have large financial institutions who have said very clearly, we will not lead on AI in talent acquisition. We will follow. You have others. I was at a conference a while ago, and a global leader of TA said, we have 9 AI platforms that we're using today. And so I was the one who asked the question. I'm like, so how many of those are integrated with Workday, which was their platform? And she said 0. I said, that sounds awful. So it's such a chaotic time, but an exciting time for all the things that are out there in front of us. So I don't know if I specifically answered your question or not, but I can go down this trail, very, very far.
I think you and I could keep on riding that pony for a long time, like going down that conversation. So the big thing I heard is leaders are looking for not just a tool, but they're looking for confidence. They're looking for clarity and the level of depth, level of insight that your team are bringing is helping them to feel that level of confidence to go down a path. One of the things that we heard, I can't remember if you were with me or not in the room, but last year at the RPO Association conference, there was a panel of heads of talent, these leaders that are making these decisions every day. And one of them was like, listen, we may not be able to get approval from someone to do that, but if we have a partner that does that, we can, that would be perfectly fine. And I want to combine that with, just before I got on with you here today for this conversation, I was talking to a VP of talent friend of mine, and she was telling me about some of the things that they were building, some of the things they were doing, some of the capabilities they now have, they didn't have before. It's not just automating stuff and being faster at those tasks, but because I have those things, I can do this new thing that I couldn't do before. And to me, that's where the real opportunity is. And that's sort of what you were peeling back there, I think, is there are opportunities to add value, to connect with candidates. You talked about the problems a minute ago, the challenges they're facing. We can get to those problems. We're not just busy hustling just to stay on the treadmill.
I think the RPO firms have kind of a unique opportunity. It's very different than anything I've seen at this point. To be able to, number one, advise, to be able to showcase to its clients and prospects what is out there, what is working, what is delivering results, and what is maybe too new or what needs additional development. And then they can bring those tools as part of their service offering to their prospective clients. It gives the clients the opportunity to test and trial these new AI platforms without having to go all in. Now, there are some risks with that. I'm sure everybody's heard about the Paradox McDonald's event from a few weeks ago, where I think it was 64 million candidate records were exposed. They quickly fixed it and learned a lot from it. Or, Workday is having a class action lawsuit right now for its AI hiring tools, having bias for individuals over 40. And so I think there's a lot that needs to settle. And, there's this kind of natural curve of, this great enthusiasm for all of these tools that are out there. And then over the course of time, it'll settle in of what are the ones that are adding real value. You and I talked earlier before we started recording about sourcing tools, and there's so many of them out there. And are they really making a difference? And, does that kind of threaten perhaps an RPO? Like, is it doing some of those transactional things that you might do? For me, it all kind of goes back to that level of expertise, the level of insight that a recruiter brings to the value proposition between the hiring manager and the candidate. And yes, those tools can make you much more efficient, but it's comparable to we had a call center, we don't have a call center. Like, we had sourcers, and, maybe now we elevate the role of the recruiter, and that they have all these tools that can help them. But I'm sure you've also heard, Ben, the resume avalanche that companies are seeing because of AI. And, that creates a different set of complex problems. And not only because you might get 200 resumes an hour for a role that you're never going to get a chance to look at, what creates candidate frustration, but you might be missing out on great talent. So, those things have to settle in. I think we have a long journey for those things to really start to be meaningful. Are the great tools out there that get on my platform a little bit? I do think that companies, and this is where we try to offer sage advice, don't get confused around automation and AI. So, we're constantly automating, and you should be constantly automating. So, to me, interview scheduling is automating, right? Now, there are certain elements of it where you learn, all right, so this manager has this panel, or, this is the most effective way to get candidate availability, et cetera, where the technology can learn. But I just think there's a lot of confusion around what is AI and what is automation. I'd love your perspective on that.
Oh gosh, goodness. Again, this is my turn to spend a couple of days, Terry, diving into this. I agree with you. We should always be automating things that do not add additional value. Something that has a touch point that if I'm doing it or I'm not doing it, the person at the other end of it will not care. And so my nerdy 2x2 grid on that is the more process focused that it is versus people focused, and the more repetitive and routine it is compared to something novel or different or unique every time. When it's very repetitive and when it's process focused, automate the heck out of it. Get it out of your hands, because this is your chance to put more time and effort into the human side. And the data that we have on employers that are using AI tools, automation tools, things that make them more efficient. We said, if that's making you more efficient, what are you doing with that time? That newly freed up time is where the real value is. It's not in, okay, we saved an hour, so let's all put our feet up on the desk and just relax. But we are now able to build relationships with key stakeholders in the business. We get to finally understand what the heck they're doing over there in that line of business where we've always wanted to understand, and we just never had time to get into it. We get to prove to the business the value we're bringing through metrics and data and evidence and proof. So those sorts of things to me are exciting unlocks and opportunities, because we're using those tools, not saying the answer to your problem is that, no, we can use that, but it's going to open up this opportunity for us to do something else even better down the line.
Exactly. There's so many good things that are out there right now. I mean, the list is endless of what you could be experimenting with. I was doing some research for a financial services company, and I was comparing them to their competitors. And one of them, a very large financial service company, when you went on, it told you exactly who had applied for the opening. This is on a company's website, so not like Indeed or anything. And how many times the job had been filled in the last 6, 12 months, how many candidates average for each requisition. And so I won't name the name of the technology, but I was really impressed. It's like, holy cow, like that is like really valuable information that a candidate would want to see. I mean, the other thing I wanted to kind of add to your comment is that as you automate and free up, it should give you the opportunity to engage with the candidate more. So one of the things we've done is that at any point, the candidate can opt to speak to a live operator. So we don't have a call center, but we do connect it to someone who then can answer the question for that candidate. So it is bringing that, additional human touch to the candidates that desire that. Not everybody wants that, but optionality is key.
We saw you talked about this a little bit, how some of this is personal preference, consumer desires bleed over into candidate desires. And like my mother goes into the bank anytime she wants to do anything. I haven't been inside a bank since until I had to sign paperwork one time. Like that's the last I've been there.
Yeah.
And like that's like a little microcosm of pressures is different, as you just sort of mentioned. And one of the things that stuck out to me in the data this year on candidates was that overall, candidates who are younger were like, this is about speed. It's about efficiency. Let's get right there. That could be a play on age and like that demographic, but it also could be they're not applying for a director level, leadership role in a company where there's going to be this process where I'm seeing are they out of their minds over there before I say yes to come work for them? And the other, like you're interviewing the company, like they're interviewing you. So you see those sort of things like that where the preferences are different depending on someone's age and how they feel about those things. But it goes back to what you said earlier about we've got to see and respect the needs of the candidates, try to meet them where we can, and try to insert the human wherever the opportunity presents itself, because that's what they're seeking. That's what makes it a good process. And honestly, we get fulfillment out of doing that. I bet the recruiters on your team smile big when they close a rec, just like I used to, because there's a joy in helping someone find the right role for them. So there's a human piece.
Consistently hear from the team that one of the things that's gratifying to them is to be able to help that individual kind of find the right place for them. Yes. And I started as a recruiter, and being able to fulfill someone's dream or help them along the way is pretty powerful.
Yes. Okay. So last question for you. What do you see as the next big priority for talent teams? What's coming around the line?
Yeah, I think we're in kind of unusual economic times, right? So there's tremendous uncertainty. Stock market is still going relatively crazy. There's uncertainty around, what impact tariffs will have and whatnot. So I think there's just, there's so many plates that are spinning, On top of that, you have companies that are trying to decide, what's the right path for us? How do we scale properly? How do we bring the right technology? How do we consistently ensure that we're bringing in the right talent into our organization? I think to the extent that talent leaders are thinking about all of those things that shape them for the future around how do I scale? How am I a strategic talent partner? How am I maximizing our investments into technology? And how does that all fit together to allow us to be able to provide the very best to the organization that we're supporting? So I think the journey will be fraught with, lots of diversions, and, technology will continue to advance. Staying close to that, being on top of what's new for your industry or what's new for talent acquisition industry, and staying in front of that. It's changing so rapidly. The pace of change has increased, and just staying on top of that, I think, is the best thing that TA leaders can do for their organization.
Staying sharp, stay on top of those things, knowing themselves, knowing what's happening in the business. Okay, I've got that. It feels like I could afford to not pay attention to the bigger world when I was doing some of this recruiting, again, more than a decade ago. And the farther along time gets, the more you've got to have some awareness of all the bigger things, the plates that are spinning, as you mentioned, not just enough to know your company, your jobs, your load, those sorts of things, but knowing the bigger picture and how that's affecting things. And that's one of the other areas that we see in the data where employers lean on RPO partners to help them stay in touch with those sort of trends, because it's a full-time job just to stay up on how things are changing. Because, hey, as a national economy, it may be this way, but hey, within the state, this new law just passed, and it's going to dramatically affect roles in this space because there's now tax breaks for something, like whatever it is. Throw it in there. Like, it just shows you how nuanced it can get, and that level of expertise there is so critical. So if someone wants to learn more about NXTThing, the good work that you and the team are doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Certainly certainly, visit our website, and there's ways for people to connect with us. Myself, Jamie Manier, we're both really incredibly active. We're both heavily involved in conversations, and whether that's people that want to be a part of us or, prospects and learn more about talent acquisition, just feel free to reach out. There's multiple ways to connect with us, but we'd love to share with you some of the innovative things that we're doing. The one thing I did want to add, Ben, was I have seen over the past 18 to 24 months is companies being super cautious on professional hiring just because of some of the uncertainty that we've seen in economically. I do believe there will be pent-up demand, and we are starting to see some movement from companies who are now starting to open up requisitions that they've been very cautious or conservative about. I do think, this whole, is it a candidate market, an employer market? At the end of the day, I strongly believe that it's always a candidate market, that you have to position yourself to be able to be very competitive in the candidates that you're going after. We will see more pressure in exempt hiring. We've had a bit of a hiatus for the last 2 years. We will see more pressure, and it's coming. I don't know if it's 2 quarters or 3 or 4 quarters away, but it is coming.
I appreciate that perspective. It's easy to be all doom and gloom. That's the easiest way to do it because that's gets people, gets clicks and gets attention and everything else. But some of the things I look at, and you probably do too, I look at companies that are posting roles for recruiters and looking at that as an indicator that they're planning on hiring and ramping up. And some of the data that I'm seeing, the preliminary on that, are interesting, we'll say. So there's some opportunities ahead. And oh my goodness, again, I love every conversation. Like I said, I walk away with big ideas, big thinking around this. And I appreciate you sharing some of the things that's happening, both when you use the word creepy, I think, as describing some of the virtual AI recruiters, as well as like some of the cool, some of the exciting, some of the opportunities that are there. So I appreciate you so much for spending some time with us.
Absolutely, Ben. Been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, sir. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more good stuff coming up next time on We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host. We appreciate you all for listening. We'll catch you again next time. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.